Welcome to The Good News is Better Than You Think, Chapter 27, The Work of a Lifetime. What is sanctification? The popular concept of sanctification is that it is the process by which we are made fit for heaven. In most cases, this has been interpreted to mean that it is a process by which, little by little, we become more and more holy, more and more like Christ, until eventually we are just like Him. It is interesting to note that the word sanctification carries a different meaning in the Bible, and it nearly always speaks of a finished work. For example, God sanctified the Sabbath day, Genesis 2 verse 3. Paul speaks of the Corinthian believers and says, "But ye are washed, but ye are sanctified," 1 Corinthians 6 verse 11. Again he says, "For by one offering he has perfected forever them that are sanctified," Hebrews 10 verse 14. Here the word signifies to be set apart for a holy purpose and signifies an immediate experience. But admittedly, the word as used today refers to a process by which a person becomes progressively more holy. Let us consider something right at the very beginning. When we say that sanctification is the work of a lifetime, whose lifetime are we talking about? Do we mean the lifetime of Methuselah, which was 969 years? The lifetime of Enoch, 365 years? The lifetime of Moses, 120 years? Or the lifetime of today's average person, 70 to 80 years? And what about the lifetimes of those whose lives are cut much shorter by sickness or accident? How long does it really take to be sanctified? How long did it take for the thief on the cross who lived for only a few hours after he was converted? Immediately we can see that we have to revise our ideas of sanctification. The idea that sanctification is a process which comes to an end when we have attained to a certain level of holiness or perfection is a false idea. If it were true, then what it would mean is that most Christians never ever are fully sanctified. Maybe we all need a longer lifetime. Perhaps we all need 365 years like Enoch. But then again, even that may not be enough, because it seems that even Methuselah, who lived almost 3 times as long as Enoch, never reached the place where he walked with God as closely as Enoch did. If sanctification is what makes us fit for heaven, then why did it happen so quickly, as in the case of the thief on the cross, and happen so slowly in the case of others whose lifetimes are almost 100 years? In Hebrews 4 verses 9 to 11, Paul tells us that there is a rest which remains for the people of God. He explains that the person who has entered into God's rest has rested from the person's own works, just as God rested from His works at the end of creation. If we have rested from our works, does it mean that there will be no more works done for us? Absolutely not. As Paul again says, it is God which worketh in you both to will and to do of His good pleasure. Philippians 2 verse 13. Notice, there are works in the life of the believer, but they are not his works. They are the works of Christ. In a strikingly paradoxical statement, Paul says, "Let us labor therefore to enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief." Hebrews 4 verse 11. I had to smile when I recognized what Paul was saying. Here he says that we must labor, we must work. For what purpose? So that we can rest. We must labor so that we may rest. Is this contradictory? Not at all. Here we find the harmony between both ideas of sanctification. That is, that it is the work of a lifetime, as opposed to the immediate experience of being set apart wholly unto God. The danger against which Paul warns us in Hebrews 4 is the danger of unbelief. He says we must labor so that we can enter God's rest. But how do we enter? It is by faith that we enter. So it becomes evident that all our labor must be to help us to have faith, not to do works. Where works are concerned, we rest. We enter into God's rest. Our work is finished. Our only problem is that unbelief may keep us from this rest, and so we must labor. We must struggle to keep the focus of faith. This is the sum totality of the Christian's struggle, the fight to maintain faith. Because where there is faith, the fight is finished. Where faith is, God works, and the battle is over. If the life of victory over sin is ours simply by faith in Christ, then it is evident that we may have this experience immediately as soon as we have faith. However, it is equally evident that since this victory is ours purely by faith, then it is the maintaining of faith which determines whether or not we keep it. God's work is always perfect, but His ability to work in us is dependent upon our faith. So there is a battle to be fought, but notice, it is not a battle to do right. It is not a struggle to overcome sin. It is the good fight of faith. It is the struggle to maintain our faith. This explains why sanctification, the work of being set apart unto Christ, is an instant work which takes place as soon as we are in Christ, but at the same time is a process which lasts for the rest of a person's lifetime. A man in Christ is wholly acceptable to God, and such a person is complete in Him. Colossians 2 verse 9. He is sanctified or set apart unto God. However, every day of his life, for as long as he lives, whether it is 969 years or 70 years, this person must continually maintain this experience in Christ by faith. It is not an automatic process in which the relationship maintains itself. Faith must be nurtured, fed, exercised, jealously guarded, and this fight of faith continues as long as a person lives. It is not that it takes a whole lifetime to become holy. No, it is that this holy status, which we receive at the very beginning, must be maintained for the rest of our lives, whether that is 2 years or 969 years. It is the work of a lifetime. So the thief on the cross, who lived only a few hours, was sanctified during his lifetime, and so was Methuselah, who lived 969 years. The work never came to an end while they lived. They never came to the place where they could say, "Now I am sanctified," and there is no need to have this experience tomorrow. Notice, it is not sanctification which requires work. This was the work of God. It is the faith which brings sanctification which must be maintained during the work of a lifetime.